from our, again, a fabulous day of really discussing and practicing together. We talked about, again, the beginning pieces of the precepts with, so say, Getsu Roger Cochran. We also had a Sangha discussion after that as well, and then we got to know each other. So we're continuing that. Our evening retreat is always circling back to a Dharma talk. So upcoming we have, let me grab this and introduce our speaker for this evening. There we go. KuWasan, I know you always like when I throw your picture up there, so of course I got to do this to you. But we're going to welcome this evening KuWasan Ann Glassman. She's going to be speaking with us about Vows Vowing. But I want to tell you a little bit about KuWasan before we get it started. KuWasan is an STO novice priest. She and her husband, Robert, retired from the School of Music at Wichita State University and relocated to their little log cabin in southwestern Montana in 2010. There they live with their two pups, leaving Montana only occasionally to visit their grandchildren. If you keep her out on Facebook, you'll see some fabulous nature pictures, her dogs and her grandchildren. So you'll get a really good view of what's going on there in the weather. KuWasan maintains a daily practice, which he includes an ongoing acceptance and gratitude for Montana winters that lasts at least 6 months of the year. After taking Jukai in 2001, KuWasan was ordained as a novice priest in 2011. Her Shuki Takudo was held in Wichita, Kansas at the Southwind Sangha. Let's all welcome KuWasan Ann Glassman. And again, before she talks, as always, we have to do our beginning Dharma verse. So bear with me right here. I get this back up.
But anyway, hello everyone, and thank you for having me speak to you. And yes, I would also like to thank Segetsu for his extremely well thought out and clear presentation of the precepts and the Four Noble Truths. I would also like to thank Zenku for this morning, because mornings are a little hard, but I think I heard geese and birds and maybe a squirrel, and the beautiful flowers made it just sort of a wonderful opening for this retreat. I'm going to have a little sip of water. So as April said, my husband and I received refuge about 20 years ago. And we were from Wichita, and that Sangha there was a very wonderful Sangha. It was a very quiet Sangha. We didn't have a lot of book reading or discussion early on, at least. We got a lot of instruction in Zazen. Occasionally we would have a Dharma talk on Sunday, but mostly we were very, very quiet. And I think I'll always be grateful for that beginning instruction, even though quiet was sometimes uncomfortable. So when I received the precepts, just being really new at this, only being there for a year or so, the idea of it seemed pretty straightforward, clear. After hearing them, I thought, well, okay, I have broken some of them, but now I get a clean slate. Here I am in the precepts, and it seemed really kind of nice. And as a young practitioner, I know that I was listening with my subjective ears, and I still do. So I kind of formed what the precepts kind of meant to me. And along with everybody else, I stepped into the path with my ignorance. I didn't really know that I had it so much, but as the years went by, I figured it out, which is a good thing to know that you have something like that. So I continued on my journey with these people, had a lovely precept ceremony. We always went on a Sunday to a little place called Bagatelle. It used to be very close to the place where we met. It was a little French patisserie. And even though we were a very, very quiet Sangha, we became very intimate without saying words. And yet still at this coffee shop, the most intimate thing we knew about each other, I knew what Catherine had in her coffee. I knew what this person had in his coffee. This guy brought a little packet of cocoa along. So that was very nice. And the other thing about this group that is very funny is that this very quiet Sangha, we had to have been the loudest group of people at the coffee shop for miles. I was always a little worried that we were going to get thrown out of the coffee shop because we had very big guffaws and laughs. So it was a lovely time, and I was very grateful. So after my ceremony and my husband's ceremony, we piled into the car, and like everybody, we had to go to the grocery store. So we're driving from the Zendo, and it was kind of an odd feeling because life was kind of returning to normal. This glow of receiving the precepts and becoming a Buddhist, it was changing for me. I got out of the car, I could hear the carts banging at the grocery store and moms yelling at their kids to come here. And I walked into the store and the whiff of the refrigeration stuff and all of the food, and it was very normal. And it was kind of like a shock, like coming out of a movie theater back into the real world, or so I thought. You know, I didn't think it should change so much. And I ran into a friend in the cheese aisle. I remember this so well. And we exchanged yada yadas. What are you doing? You know, what's your next concert? She's a musician. And she said, well, what are you up to today? And without thinking, I said, oh, I became a Buddhist. And I don't know, something might have felt funny about that, but I kind of put it out of my mind, and we went on and got back into the car and went home and started our life. And I didn't think about that cheese aisle for a couple of years. So I kept practicing, kept meeting with my Sangha. The honeymoon feeling of that ceremony did wear off after about 2 weeks because life came rushing back. Everything was normal. I was still frustrated. I was still sad. Sometimes I knew that some precepts were being broken, and it was sort of shocking to me. Not as easy as I thought. So I became more curious about it. And I think I was starting to figure out that things are not as they seem, which was a good thing. For instance, as we've heard a lot today about do not kill, that one just really stumped me because I eat broccoli. I don't know that the broccoli is happy about that. As everybody has said, we dig up worms. We cause all kinds of harm. So I knew that it wasn't possible to live without, you know, someone else's life as the cost of my living. So that one was big mystery to me. I noticed that animals, you know, the voles at my house kill my aspen tree. They just chomp it right down. The pronghorns kill my daisies. A grizzly bear just last month attacked and killed a very famous fisherman guide on the river. I don't think he intended to do that. He didn't intend to cause great harm. He was just being a bear. But now I think back to the cheese aisle and, you know, me breaking a precept. I think literally years later, I thought, why did I say to my friend, I became a Buddhist? And the best I can come up with is that deep down, I didn't like that feeling that it wasn't going to be a special golden thing that lasted forever. So in my attempt to hold on to that feeling, I sort of broke a precept and elevated myself up and kept her over there. I didn't say this, of course, but I must have thought it deep down, well, you're not a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist. So right off the bat, an hour later, I broken at least one precept that I know of. So that even made it seem more difficult to me. It's one thing to break a precept. I think over the years now, my body, I can pretty much control what I do with my body, speech, and mind. My speech, I am doing much better. I can control it to some degree, a lot more than I used to be able to. So, and I still things pop out that I wish wouldn't have. But for sure, my mind seems to be where I break most of my precepts. There's a Tibetan word that is gom, G-O-M, and it is their word to describe meditation. But what it means, it doesn't mean meditation, it means to become familiar with. And I think our Zazen practice, that's exactly what we do. We are becoming familiar with ourselves or our mind, well, and our body and speech as well. So we sit on the cushion. As you all know, we sit, we notice things, we let them go. It sounds so simple. We do it, but it's so difficult. But that's the essence of it. If we're lucky to keep practicing for years, I think we can start to see a pattern with ourselves while we're sitting. A lot of the patterns are just old habits of thoughts that come up. Some of the thoughts are ancient. I have a classic thought that comes up from 1986, a conversation that I relive, that somebody said something, I said something, this person said, yeah, but, and I was dumbfounded. And this hits my cushion every now and then because I know what I should have said. I should just call him up and tell him what I should have said. But anyway, the point is that over and over again, we see these patterns of our habitual mind. We live on a dirt road that gets drifted over. We wait for months and months and months for the snow to melt. Luckily, when we go out towards the highway, there's a slight decline in the road. So we wait until the snow has a great deal of melt to it, and we get in our truck and we crash through the drifts. And when we do this, sometimes some of the dirt is exposed in our tire tracks, but the drifts are still pretty high on the other sides. But the fact that we have exposed this very soft mud is the beginning of this road starting to give way. Eventually we're going to get through, but then overnight it freezes again, and when we try to drive on it, we try to widen it, but there's just no way. We fall back into those little ruts. It just reminds me of my thinking. You know, we sit and we're getting good, we're getting better at letting it go, kind of getting out of the rut, but it'll come back and we'll fall in the rut, but we'll let it go again. We'll just sit there until it comes back again, maybe not for another day, or maybe 2 minutes later, it's going to come back. But the point is, this muddy mess is the beginning of something good. I think that if we didn't have these thoughts and emotions, we wouldn't have anything to work with. We wouldn't have a practice, I don't think. We would just, I don't know what it would be like if we didn't have any of that, but that's the nature of humans, that we have all of this. So I think we have to view those things very kindly as a nature of our mind. I think then we can begin to investigate our minds, because we are becoming very familiar with it over time. And, as we let things drop away, we may see that they had no substance or validity at all to begin with, which makes it even easier to kind of let them fall away. It's like cleaning out that drawer in your kitchen where you let stuff accumulate. You pull out a piece of string and think, what in the world? So we can do this with our mind as we find out that we are not our thoughts. We get more and more familiar. It just becomes easier to let the stories drop. I find sometimes when they do go away for a minute, that there is a gap where I'm not thinking, I'm not particularly feeling anything. And that's a good thing. It's a gap. It doesn't last very long. Some people call it a sense of groundlessness. Some people identify it as our Buddha nature, that we sit there with it for a minute and then it goes away. You've probably all heard the old story about the jewel. It could be anything really, but I think the original story is a jewel that is buried in the mud, and you don't know it's there. It's still a jewel. Its quality hasn't changed, but because it is obscured in the mud, we have more trouble accessing it. So it's there. So in our Zazen, of course, we're trying to clean that up a little bit. The other thing about seeing what we're doing is that we can see how we get defensive. This is the other part of finding out about myself. You can take a little peek at what is happening to yourself when you fall into these habitual patterns. And sometimes those patterns are what end up making us cause harm to ourselves or others. It's kind of difficult to look at. I think it is better if you do, on your own terms, take a peek yourself. Wait it, otherwise, a boulder is going to fall on your head when you discover something that you've done. So Sensei Hojo, for as long as I've known him, has said something like, we most easily observe the precepts, these precepts that I think are very mysterious and kind of difficult. He says we most easily observe them when we break them. And so I think it's okay. I think that's a good thing. And the Buddhist teachings ask us to find out for ourselves what it is that we're doing. So when we look, kind of a self-observation, we can look into that space, kind of like where the mud is melting on the road. It's a very spacious place. It's a safe place. We can see probably the things we're doing. And I think these things, our ignorance, our arrogance, all of these things, they all have potential to help us awaken. If when we're looking at ourselves, we kind of tighten up and get critical, kind of judgmental, which I've done, I think you're just gonna kind of shore back up your old habits. And I don't blame myself, because sometimes I just want some security. I want things to go back the way they are. I mean, sometimes it's not a comfortable thing. But if you sit still enough, long enough, your neuroses and your confusion are going to have a pretty good chance of slowly transforming into wisdom and clarity, which we all read about and study and hope for. I think our arrogance has the potential to kind of humble us I hope. When we're unkind, we see that, we have the potential to soften. And if we're sleepy and just very lost, we can also have the chance to be pierced and kind of wake up a little bit. So I'd like to read something that I consider to be a little bit of encouragement from Okumura. It's from his book, Living by Vow. I think this paragraph is very familiar as a Zazen instruction. He says, start right from the posture of silence, from the ever fresh life force that is free from any defilement. Moment by moment, we start again. This is not where human evaluation and discrimination works. This is true repentance. So that sounded to me like what we aspire to in our Zazen practice. I especially liked from the ever fresh life force, and that moment by moment we start again, because we lose that sometimes and we come back. So I found that to be very, very encouraging. More of the good news is during Zazen, we are developing our bodhicitta. I start my mornings with refuge and bodhicitta chants, whether, if it's a busy day and I'm not going to be able to sit, I still do that. It's the one thing I try to do. And the four immeasurables, the bodhicitta part of this, I think Kojo mentioned it in one of his podcasts. Now there are a million translations, and this one is the one that I use, and the word doesn't matter so much that is chosen, as long as it's a word that speaks to you. So the one that I read, and some of the words are, they bring up things. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May they be free from suffering and its causes. May they never be parted from sublime bliss, free from suffering. May they dwell in great equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. So the four immeasurables touch upon loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And when we start with this practice with all sentient beings, and we add this to the mix of our practice, I think it changes it. It can be overwhelming, and it definitely becomes a concept. All sentient beings is, well, you all know, we've been talking about that today a lot. A long time ago, I asked one of my teachers about this all sentient being thing, because it was overwhelming. And he reminded me that I'm one of those all sentient being people. So I kind of liked that. I'm a me. And I think those guys are the other guys, or all the sentient beings. But over there, those other guys, I'm a me to them. So in a nice way, we're all kind of in the same boat. We're swimming in a sea of me's. So that helped me a lot. So I'm one of the sentient beings. So when we work for the sake of all sentient beings, we pretty much have to start with our favorite sentient being, the most treasured one, which is ourselves. I know that sounds a little selfish, but I think it's true. So to do this, we need some form of aspiration. I think aspiration is a much easier thing to do, to bring to your practice when things are going well, when the bills are paid and the weather is beautiful and your spouse is happy and the dogs are happy the children are behaving. It's very easy to have aspiration for all beings. But when something happens to me, and it always does, and it can bring up a different feeling. And your first instinct is to say, hey, I know I want it to go back the way it was. I don't need this. And I will typically look for somebody, you need to not do that because I want that's my knee-jerk reaction. But slowly, I think, and sometimes it takes a while, if I stopped for a minute and just kind of let myself get closer to some fear and confusion, because that's how I feel if I can't grab onto my normal feeling of get away from me. When I can do that, I can start in retrospect probably to be grateful for these situations. I'm pretty sure, well, I'm very sure that bad situations have some sense of potential for us. They for us, because they kind of blow our cover. And all the nasty stuff in the world starts with us. So if these bad things that happen kind of just strip us bare, there we are. And we have to deal with it from ourselves. I think I even heard President Biden say something like, when he was talking to the Congress a few weeks ago, that with great chaos comes, what did he say? Great opportunity. That was his word. And I do believe that it is eventually true. It doesn't always feel immediate. So in thinking about how to move through these qualities of loving kindness and compassion and joy and equanimity, I think an easy way is to see all beings in some categories, which we all experience. We all have people that we consider the ones we get along with, the ones we love, we have great affection for. We have people that we know and we don't, feel one way or another. They're just people, kind of a neutral sense, and we're nice to each other and all of that. There are also difficult beings in the world who we feel cause us great harm or others great harm, but still they're part of the all beings that we have to deal with. So as we work through these qualities of the four immeasurables with these people, sometimes it can be really hard. I know this from experience, and I'll get to that in a second. Because when we say beings are numberless, I vow to free them, we are saying all of them. And at some point in my life, I may have thought, well, maybe except for that person. Deep down in my heart, I may have thought that. So I think I've learned to work with all beings. My wall comes down, and I like to notice it's okay if you don't feel great about all beings. It takes time, but you learn a lot about yourself. You can see what's going on. Okay, so I would like to try something. If you'll kind of bear with me, it won't take very long. It's an exercise that I've found useful. It doesn't replace Zazen, and I'm not asking that you would do it during Zazen, but it's just an interesting way to look at how you are dealing with all beings. And actually, it's not a magical kind of thing, a magical prayer to fix anything. It's an exercise that kind of stretches the capacity of your heart. So for a moment, if you would just kind of gently straighten your posture just a tiny, tiny bit, don't, be comfortable. And think of when you are most at ease in your life, the times when you have some comfort, you're content, nothing is really pulling you one way or another, but there's just a sense of some great ease. It's something we all wish for. I think that might be part of the definition of happiness for all beings. You can also now bring into this feeling someone or some people that you have great affection for, that you love. And notice how easily this wish for these beings to feel this great ease and contentment that you have, it's very easy to pass it to them. And of course, there will be times when we don't have feelings of great ease. We will start to feel some discomfort. Something has happened. It will kind of start to tug on our feeling of suffering, discontentment. It can be very strong. Feel how it is that if you're paying attention, you wish for yourself to find a way to deal with this that doesn't cause harm. And because of our Zazen, we have a lot of tools to use. So we wish that we can find a way out of our suffering, but not in a way that will hurt others. Also, extend this to your loved ones. And again, it's really pretty easy to extend this wish to people that we love and care about. So as we move into people, which is most people, I think, people we don't know who fall into the neutral category, a person who gives us coffee, our mail person who delivers the mail, people on the street. I think in general, we can see how we can wish for them to also feel comfort and ease and contentment. We have no ill will. We don't wish them, anything to harm them. It makes sense. We don't particularly want them to be sad either. That's a good chunk of humanity right there, I think, the neutral folks. So as we reach out to these people, we can see that really there is no difference. They are pretty much like us. They want to be happy. They don't want to be unhappy and suffer with things that happen that can cause problems for themselves and others. So that part of all sentient beings is really pretty easy. If you come into some difficulty, you can go back to thinking about yourself, because that's where it all starts. So you can remind yourself what it feels like to be at ease. Then, if you want to, bring to mind someone or a group of people. It doesn't have, whichever thing might mean the most to you right now. If there's a particular person that you're having a difficulty with, or even a world leader or a group of people that you feel is causing harm, and you don't particularly jump up and down about wishing them well. I'm not saying that you're wishing terrible things, but it is definitely a lot more difficult to see that person in the height of his suffering, which makes him or her do things that are very harmful. So if you can, try to see this situation or these people or this person as someone who also has that soft spot, that mud spot that wants to melt open the road. I had an experience that was very difficult. It took 2 years of this kind of practice. And I think I was faking it for a long time. But these people want to be happy and at ease and content as well. Their way of going about it is crazy. It just continues their suffering and makes it tighter and tighter and makes it worse for everybody. So, but that person is just like us. So that helps me. And finally, in this exercise, which you can take as long as you like, if you open yourself up then to every sentient being in the universe, all of the me's and all of that all just want to be happy, just like I do, just like you do. And after this practice, typically you just rest in Zazen for a while in that spacious quality. It's kind of an interesting exercise. Like I said, I had a very difficult time. I think I could have just gone south. I could have said to heck with all this. And it was a very personal relationship, and luckily I worked through it and at least could see that this person had Buddha nature, wanted to be happy just like me. So I would like to stress though that none of this exercise or any of this thinking would be possible without all the work that you put into your Zazen, because we work so hard to drop the excess, to be with our Buddha nature. We let it go. I think without Zazen, I would overthink it and kind of remain stuck in a dual situation. So it's not magical. It doesn't change other people. And it barely changes us. It's a very incremental change, like a little ripple, which I've also heard people talk about today. So it only changes us, but I think that's how we make any change. So anyway, I think Zazen is very unique in this way. I had another little saying of Hojo's. I don't know where this came from. He said, when you settle into the real world of compassion, it will naturally emanate from our most mundane activities. So even the grocery store and the cheese aisle, you know, they're not going to change, but we are going to change. So I really appreciated that. In closing, I think, yeah, we're going to include all beings in our practice, but we do have to start with ourselves, and slowly it changes us. Like I said, very tiny steps. I would like to tell you something Uchiyama said about Dogen. Dogen said something, and I was going to read it, but then I decided just to read this one sentence of clarification by Uchiyama. And he said, the most fundamental way to resolve the evils in society is by just cleaning up your own self, which is a good job. So the other thing I'd like to read you in closing, which is why I think I named my little talk Vows Vowing, because I think our Zazen helps us in a circle of vows and repentance and Zazen. It's also by Okamura from Living by Vow. And he says, vow and repentance are inseparable. When we look closely at our past deeds, we cannot help but repent. When we awaken to the total interpenetrating reality of our being and look into the future, we cannot refrain from making the vow to live with all beings and to practice according to the Buddha's teaching. Vow and repentance are two sides of the single practice of Zazen. So I thank you for listening, and thanks.
KuWasan, thank you so much for your teaching. As always, we have the opportunity after a Dharma talk to participate in Dharma discussion. Thoughts, comments, questions for KuWasan are appreciated. So again, if you have questions or comments, either raise your little hand in the Zoom, raise your hand, or you can just wave and we'll try, myself and Cosette will try to get you. So again, all are welcome at this time. Please, we welcome comments, questions.
My dogs are bolting into the house now.
I see Walter's hand.
Mhm.
That was excellent. And we were very succinct about it. And really didn't waste our time setting into that early story that I was there. It's very hard to change the bad habits. It's very hard. And you did an excellent job outlining how to do that. And it takes a lot of work, but I want to thank you very much. And I will for sure listen to your talk again because it's worth listening to. I mean, all of them have been great, but yours got me. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope you understood something. Nothing to tell you what I said. He's beginning to hear me better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I did understand, even though my dogs were barking. So I'm glad that it meant something to you. Thank you very much.
KuWasan, I will say again, thank you for your teaching as always. What I found so helpful was, again, the chaos, especially in the midst, it seems like we were talking about this last year through now, but it seems like life is, continuous opportunity. And I don't know, Hojo, you may be able to say where the saying came from, but I've heard you talk about this, about your teachers always asked you to ask for things to happen. Well, I was like, Sensei, I'm good. I think we're good. We have, I got enough happening right now. So, I mean, that resonated with me when you said that always things that arise are opportunities for our practice. And that is kind of juicy for us to work through, because no change has ever come from a lot of comfort. So, I mean, I appreciate your comments on that. Appreciate your teaching and your presence as always. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't think though that gratitude for difficult things just comes. It's hard. And sometimes it's later you're grateful, but yeah. Oh, who
That was saying
up?
Gaku.
With apologies for trying to find my cursor. KuWasan, early on you began to speak about intimacy and what you were going through. And as you continue to talk, I've had the feeling of everything is intimate when you get down to it. So were you meaning to convey that to us, or did I misfeel? Or
No.
which, yeah, thank you. Any comments you have?
I think that is exactly what it was, but at the time, I didn't recognize it as such. I was still sort of in my very black and white kind of thing, but over time, the fact that Bob Dixon brought cocoa to put in his coffee was like it was like the universe, because we were not a social group. We didn't call each other during the week and talk about what happened to us, but we sat zazen with each other, and the relationship with these people grew, but it wasn't through talking so much, which really kind of opened up something for me. So thank you for that clarification.
Yep. Sensei, we'll get you, I think, Somoju, Pat, and then we'll go to Hojo Sensei.
I was gonna say, I find sometimes, or throughout my practice, like when you're talking about dealing with another person, and you're hoping this other person kind of like figure it out, and you had to contend with it yourself, kind of thing. That like I've gone through periods of that, and then I kind of like break it down and break it down. So you're getting down lower and lower and lower to finer things. So it becomes very like this like cognitive practice. It's kind of like the Huato kind of practice. So you're constantly like analyzing and think about everything you do in a very continuous, fine way from everything that you're doing, like all, like whether you're walking or sleeping or working or whatever, you know, you're kind of like doing this fine thing. And then when you kind of like, and that's hard to really keep up. But then when you get past this point, and it's this really valuable kind of like cognitive exercise as a practice, part of the practice. Then when you get past the point, you start looking at things like, yeah, I'm just, what am I really doing so bad? You know? I don't know. I just thought
What was the last comment? You finally say what?
You get somewhere eventually and you're like, what have I been doing that's like so incredibly wrong? You know, maybe there's like a doozy here or there or something, but overall you're kind of like, I'm just a normal person.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we're all just normal people. And there is nothing wrong with kind of analyzing to a point, but that will only get you so far, because your brain is your brain and my brain is my brain, and we are never going to be able to see out of that little pair of sunglasses. And the idea isn't, what am I doing wrong? What are you doing wrong? It is a capacity to accept what is, be kind to yourself. We are here to do what we do. And as I said, when you look at yourself, you don't want to be self-judgmental, because you will tighten your potential for that mud part of the road to open up and melt the ice. So you are you and I am me. We're a bunch of me's, but that's okay. Am I saying anything? You just can't outthink yourself, because that's not where things will happen for you.
We do it in Zazen, right?
Do what in Zazen?
Outthink ourselves.
Well, we try, but we get tired of that really fast. At least for me, we try to outthink ourselves, and then hopefully we just get really tired of that game. It's very exhausting, and that's the whole point. We let it go, because that's where we get into trouble, when we just keep trying to do that. So I'm sure in your Zazen you see that you're trying to outthink yourself, trying to outsmart yourself, but just for a while, just let it drop, and you'll find out that you aren't your thoughts and you aren't your emotions. You are just a sentient being with Buddha nature, and that's why we sit Zazen, just to recognize that.
Thanks.
Ojo and then Mokyo.
When you mentioned Bob, I came across a letter from him rifling through my files for the video documentary. And it brought back a lot of memories. I remember he had a telescope mounted in his roof. We'd go upstairs into the bedroom and look out the roof through his telescope, look at stars. He was like an astronomer. But your recitation or your recap of the Metta Sutra reminded me of the negative bodhisattva. You know, we come across negative bodhisattva in our life. They're still teaching us the Dharma, but in ways we don't really appreciate very much. It's like the old blues song, if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all.
I think there's some traditions in Buddhism where your greatest teacher appears as this most horrid person crawling with maggots and is very rude and pushes you over on the path, and that's your greatest teacher. That's who you get. So anybody could be it.
Mokyo.
I want to thank you, KuWasan, for your talk, and thank you for giving us that exercise. I'm going to use that exercise. You know, I can be aware that I'm having trouble with someone, but what do I do with that? You know, if I don't do something about it, then I still always have trouble with that person or a group of people. I also appreciated you talking about fear and looking closely at our fear, because I find that beneath many of my actions that I don't like, or that create suffering for myself or others, there's fear behind that. So I just want to thank you for your talk.
Certainly, I think if you even go further than fear, I always go to the lowest common denominator, and it ends up being ignorance, and then fear pops out of that. And I don't know. I don't find it easy to do, but when I do, it's helpful.
I think Seigetsu had put his hand up earlier.
I enjoyed your talk, but my mind kept going back to the cheese aisle and wondering what was that friend's reaction both then and later to what you had said to them?
Yeah, well, I was in all black, so I don't, and we're both musicians, and that's like formal musician wear, all black. So I didn't, bother her that way. But I vaguely recall that when I said that, her eyes got really big, and then she did her usual kind of thing, and it didn't mean a thing to her. Well, I mean, it did. She just said, "Oh, really?" And I don't know why I said it, but sometimes you can feel your mouth starting to talk, and you're like, "Oh, stop." And it just kept talking, and I knew that something wasn't, I don't know. It was just a knee-jerk thing, and I knew it wasn't quite right, but I just remember that.
It meant something to you to be able to say it at that time. What did it mean to you?
Something different than it means now. Back then it meant I'm a Buddhist. I just felt like something miraculous from outside had happened to me. I had a misunderstanding about it. And so I was walking around under the side effects of that feeling, which is okay because you got to start where you got to start. And it was important to me, but probably not for the reasons that I was feeling then. It changed, but it was very important to me.
Thank you.
But it was in the cheese aisle, so
And I'm gonna do a quick time check. Oh, yes, last question from Sensei Tashi. Oops, and then Zenku-san.
If the words of the Dharma opening verse are correct, that the Dharma is hard to meet with even in 100,000 million kalpas, then perhaps it was something miraculous.
well, thank you for that.
Zenku Sensei.
I just want to say miraculous and cheesy.
Sensei Zenku, did I see you have a hand up or?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief, although that was lovely, KuWasan. Thank you so much. I kept thinking about snowbanks and perseverance for some reason. I think partly because being in Montana too, I've been going down those roads just happy as a lark, and the next thing I know, I'm deep in a snowbank. And I think that sometimes what you were relating about being on the cushion in our practice is a similar feeling. It can go both ways. Sometimes you feel just full of joy, that gap, it's there. And as soon as you try to push your way into the gap, of course, you find that you're pushing your way into the snowbank. And in a similar sense, sometimes it seems like an endless drag and wondering if there's ever going to be the sighting of a gap. And then the whole rainbow opens up for a moment or two when you weren't trying to make it happen. So I just wanted to say that your stories really inspired that kind of recognition that, yes, ups and downs, human beings, ins and outs, but the longer we sit, the greater the opportunity. And again, thank you so much for your words. It was lovely.
Thank you. Like Hojo says, never give up. Or I would have moved to Montana long ago.
Well, KuWasan, thank you again, as always, for your teaching, your wisdom, your knowledge, your presence, your gift to the Sangha. And we are so grateful. And we are so grateful for your talks. So everybody, gasho for KuWasan. And I just noticed the Zenku Shin over there as a representation of interdependence. So that being said, I'm handing the virtual ball back over to Mission Mountain Zenku Shin for our last session of Shikintaza. So again, if everyone will take a moment and get themselves situated, and we'll go into our last session. Again, gasho everyone, thank you again for your presence and your practice.